Season 2 of Velma was here. Was it better? Was it worse? I don't know. It was kind of the same because it started out fine, but then at the ending it got chaotic again, so I had to take back the points I gave it for improving upon itself. I will say that, though, that I think they toned down the over explanations a little bit. It's still there sometimes because that's their form of comedy, but it wasn't as obnoxious as I remember it being in season 1. And we have a new serial killer whose MO is biting off the crotches of middle-aged men now instead of stealing the brains of hot teenage girls. And we have Daphne's moms being bad at their jobs again, and this time, and they don't even hide it this time, they straight up hire Velma to solve the murder for them, and I don't know what they're doing actually, besides running an election to try to be the new sheriff. Oh, because the sheriff's the one who gets murdered first, so they have to get a new sheriff. And now instead of Velma having guilt hallucinations, Norval is having the guilt hallucinations now, and they're of Fred's mom because he accidentally killed her. And we get a new Hex Girl family. Amber is the Hex Girl's daughter, and she's actually an interesting character. I was kind of disappointed at the way they failed to utilize her towards the end of the season. Fred finds Jesus after his mom's murder and starts a ghost hunting business for solving crimes. He gets the mystery van and everything, and he has 2 little Pomeranian dogs instead of Scooby that eat everything. Velma's dad's baby's mama wants to get married, but he doesn't want to because he's a terrible person. Velma's mom and Fred's dads are gonna get married. What I didn't like, though, was the constant changing of events via backstory and flashbacks. It started to get exhausting, especially as we got closer to the end of the finale because everything was squished together. It was just constant information flow. Alright, so Fred is still the best character, and I think it's because he can be anything and he's open to anything. He can be a villain, he can be a hero, he can just be a plain nuisance. A few of the other characters, they're more stationary in their roles in the narrative, so I don't think they get to be played around with as much, but Fred was able to go on an entire character arc throughout this season, which I thought was pretty funny. He starts out in denial because he still thinks that Norval murdered his mom, who was possessed by Norval's grandmother? No, yeah, grandmother, not great-grandmother. So he still believes that, and so he's mad at Norval, and he's pledging that he will get to the bottom of this, and he will, I guess, get his revenge. I don't know. It was funny, though. He was running around. He had joined the Catholic Church, and he was running around fighting ghost cases and investigating because it got him money. And then after his dad and Velma's mom start dating, he learns how to love because he realizes his mom never hugged him, and he turns out he actually really likes hugs. And then he makes up with his dad, and his dad's like, "I'm sorry, son, I should have supported you more, and don't worry, we can work together to make you a real man." It was really sweet. And then he forgives Norval because Norval ends up showing him that his grandmother's actually alive and not a ghost, so he couldn't have killed his mom, and so he eventually accepts that his mom really was a serial killer. Also, he's strangely perceptive when it comes to other people's relationships and beliefs. In the beginning, Daphne was worried about her and Velma's relationship, and she was mad because Velma said "I love you" to Norval in the finale for some reason. It wasn't natural at all, but anyway, she's still mad about that. And so Fred talks her down. He's like, "If you guys are really best friends and you love each other, then you should trust each other and see the relationship through." And that was like, "Oh, okay, Fred, who are you? Are you a therapist?" And then he also talked to Velma when she was being mean about Daphne's new hobby about being a witch and stuff, and he was like, "Well, maybe you should just let her do what she wants." And she's like, "I'll think about it," because Velma was being really mean about the witch stuff, like unnecessarily vindictive. I don't know what her deal is. And he also stood up to his mother in the end when she was trying to possess him and make him into a man in her own image. It was a very strange scene, but very interesting. Yeah, so he stood up to his mom, and then she got dragged to hell because she was a serial killer, obviously. Oh, I guess I should probably explain. So Fred's mom's ghost, well, not her ghost, but I guess an apparition of her, Norval was being haunted by guilt by that, and so we all thought that it was in his imagination. After he relieves himself of the guilt because he proved to Fred that his grandma's ghost did not possess Fred's mom and kill her, that goes away, and so we think, oh, she's going away, but then she becomes solid after they leave, and it's like, oh, so she really was a ghost, she wasn't just an illusion. And she follows them around for the next few episodes, and she's like, "I have unfinished business." Amber spots her, and so they can talk now. Amber the witch girl is able to see ghosts. I don't know. Anyway, after she tells them, she's like, I can't move on to the next life until my Freddie becomes a man because that was my mission in life. Because, you know, Fred was wimpy, he was overly dependent on his parents, and he didn't really make decisions for himself. But now he has grown, and so he stands up to his mom when she decides to possess him because she's like, you're still terrible, you're not a man yet, I'm gonna make you a man. And so she plotted to take over his body and live out the rest of his life for him, which is wow. But he doesn't want to do that, so he says no, and he pushes her out, and she's like, oh my gosh, you stood up to me, you're a man, I've been vindicated. And then she goes to move on to the afterlife, and it's all glowing and stuff, and like she's gonna go to heaven, but as if she was a greedy capitalist, there's no way she's going to heaven. So then it turns all scary and dark, and she gets dragged down into the earth, and she's like, you did this to me. Yeah. Okay, so the worst episode by far has to be episode 4 for me, because well, the setup for this episode is actually really good. In episode 3, they were at the science fair, and Norval fried his brain because he kept seeing the guilt visions, and so he was like, if I burn the part of my brain that has to do with guilt, then maybe they will go away and I will be cured, and my dad won't force me to smoke weed anymore. His dad was forcing him to smoke weed to get rid of the visions, and Norval couldn't say no because his dad's a weirdo control freak parent, and so he does that. And then in doing that, he stands up to his father and is like really mean to him, really rude. And so they're like, oh no, Norval, you killed your empathy sensors, which I thought was awesome. And I was hoping that they would let him stay like that for a bit. But of course, in the next episode, episode 4, they retconned it and they were like, oh, his empathy's coming back, guys. He's going to be normal soon. It's like, ugh, what a waste of an opportunity to do something crazy with a character that's normally chill. Anyway, moving on. Another reason this episode was annoying was the lamp shading. It was disgusting. And then they're also doing a play on the Breakfast Club by simultaneously hating on the 80s constantly, and I was like, why? And I guess it is because right now in pop culture the 80s stuff is popular, but I mean, people like it for a reason. They got some good music and they got some good movies, so it is what it is. And Velma's just so negative this episode. I was tired. I was like, can somebody put her in her place? They didn't, of course. So while they're doing their Breakfast Club shtick and they're in the library, Amber's like, let's do a seance to find Fred's mom's ghost so that we can prove that she wasn't possessed or something like that. I don't know. They get the materials for the seance and they're doing it, and then spooky things start happening and stuff's flying across the room. And Velma sees someone in the shadows, so she throws a book at her, and it turns out it was Amber. So Velma's like, Amber, I knew it. You're the one pulling all of this. You're a ghost and you're killing people. And she's just going off on her because she's mad that Daphne has been hanging out with Amber and doing witchy stuff, and she doesn't believe in witch stuff. She thinks it's stupid. So of course that makes her angry, even though it has nothing to do with her. And she ends up calling Daphne an idiot, and Daphne cries and like runs away. Yeah, that was episode 4. I was almost asleep for half of it, and then at the end it ramped up all of a sudden. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about Velma and Daphne's relationship because it's terrible. It's worse than the Joker and Harley to me. Velma and Daphne are just two angsty teenagers. I don't know why they're acting like this. Or at least why Velma's acting like this. She always has to be right, even when she's terrible, and the narrative supports this. Velma's almost always proven right. Even when she isn't proven right, she's still given the benefit of the doubt. I think that's why she's so annoying to me. Like, no one can put her in her place ever. And the person that could have put her in her place was Amber, but as the season goes on, she plays less and less of a role in the narrative. Like, even there was this episode where they throw all the women into a cave because I don't even know how to explain this. So after it was revealed that the sheriffs were letting Velma head the investigation, and after it was revealed that the new serial killer was a woman, everyone in town got paranoid, especially the men. So they elected the man who is the dead sheriff's twin brother who has the same voice to be the new sheriff. And that guy, who's not so smart upstairs, decided that in order to give themselves time to figure out who the serial killer is, all of the women needed to go into the Crystal Cove and live there for like 36 hours. And in that moment, they said, anyone who's a woman must go into the caves. And Amber and her mom pipe up. They're like, what if you don't identify as a woman? And they're like, oh, you can leave then. And so they got rid of her for that whole episode for half a joke, I guess. And now for Daphne, Daphne has no boundaries and lets Velma do whatever she wants. She can be controlling and possessive. She can obsess over her, and that's fine. If you like that, that's perfectly fine. But I draw the line at bullying your partner for their interests repeatedly. And then Daphne just lets her do it. She cries and then she goes back to her the next day. And then later they infer that Daphne cheated on Velma with Amber. That's not what happened. It turns out she was actually trying to curse her, but they did it in secret, so anyone who was watching thought they were going to hide away to make out or something. And it's played as some horrible thing, but I don't know. I think Velma kind of deserves to be cursed at this point. She's done a lot of terrible things, like posting online that Amber was the witch so that people would go to her house and try to burn her alive. That's not very nice. So I almost wished Daphne had cheated on her just to teach her a lesson. That's probably a terrible thing to say, but yeah. Finale rundown. So at the end of the field trip, they're on this bus and Velma gets kidnapped by Scrappy and he tells her his Project Scooby sob story. It turns out that in Project Scooby, he was created to spy on teenagers, and all of the male victims who have been murdered this whole season were involved in it, except for Gigi's dad. He's still alive. He was involved in it, but he's not dead yet. And they made him indestructible because they're idiots, I guess, and they gave him catchphrases so that the kids would love him. It is so weird. He says a catchphrase, and then it's like he has a mild seizure or something and freezes and then continues with what he was saying. It's a very unfortunate existence he lives. And he looks disgusting though, so apparently Scrappy made people uncomfortable in the workplace, which I 100% believe because he made me uncomfortable when I was looking at him. Very unfortunate. And so all the dead guys who were made uncomfortable, they needed a lawyer to get rid of him. So they asked Velma's dad to support them, but Gigi's dad, the military guy, called it off because he's close friends with Velma's dad, and he owed him a favor. And if there's some joke about sexual harassment in the workplace, and all the men go, because they don't really believe it's a real thing. And this next episode is the one where they lost me because it was very, who's the villain, why is the villain, there's a plan, it's weird and distracting, I don't know. So Velma pretends to believe Scrappy after his sob story so she can trap him with the vacuum cleaners, because dogs hate vacuum cleaners. She convinces her dad to get married so they can have a bachelor party as a diversion. By the way, Norval's grandma, the scientist who disappeared years ago, she's the brain swapper and she's been secretly working with Scrappy and Uncle Scooby to help them escape. And I think to get herself a younger body, and that's why the government kept the bodies of the 3 teenage girls that were murdered in the first season, is so that they could do this with Uncle Scooby. And now it's time for the double wedding. Velma's mom and Fred's dad, and Velma's dad and stepmommy are getting married together on the same day because Velma's dad and Fred's dad are competitive. I don't know what's going on. They have a Freaky Friday. Velma and Daphne decide to switch bodies to walk a mile in each other's shoes, and Velma thinks it'll be easier to investigate if she isn't being watched. And she also believes that Daphne being hotter than her will help her investigate easier because everyone loves attractive people, right, and wants to help them. But that turns out to be wrong because she is getting sexually harassed by everyone in the street. And everyone keeps trying to she's putting up posters at one point, and the poster has her phone number on it because she's looking for information. And these men are following her and they keep picking up the posters and calling her immediately. It's just oh, yeah, that didn't work, did it? And then Daphne realizes that being mid and smart isn't all it's cracked up to be because everyone ignores you because you're not pretty, so they want to listen, I guess. Now, Velma finally figures out that her stepmom is Uncle Scooby, and then Scrappy pulls up with his dog squad and starts murdering everyone and biting their crotches off. He gets into the house, and Scrappy throws Velma off the balcony, and Gigi's dad sends a missile to try to kill Scrappy, but it ends up killing Velma and almost everyone else too because they were in a helicopter, and the helicopter crashes to the ground. And so Scrappy, he's invincible, so of course the missile didn't kill him. He emerges from the fire and the ashes, and he's fine. And so dead Velma, she's a ghost now. She possesses Scrappy and short circuits his brain like Fred's mom tried to do to him so that she saves everyone. So now Scrappy's dead and Velma's a ghost. And I have to wonder, now will season 3 have another serial killer, or will it be about getting Velma a body since according to the scientists her body is no longer viable. She couldn't fix her, it was too much internal damage. Velma's show, the strong suits, is definitely the physical comedy. And also when the jokes aren't trying to be too meta or like, how do you do fellow kids with the pop culture references and stuff, it just ends up falling flat for me. So there's this one plot line about Norval falling in love with Lola the brain. So when they first meet in the library, he's looking at her and wondering so he can experiment on her to help himself because he's thinking, if I can figure out how brains work, I can get rid of this guilt apparition that's following me around. And so she ends up calling out to him and they hang out together. And he gives them skateboards so the brains are mobile by themselves now. They don't have to rely on people picking them up and putting them down. And then he saves her life because the brains need nutrients and they're dying if they don't get nutrients. And then she helps him with the science fair. And then on the field trip, they're hanging out together, they're flirting, they're dating, they're reading. They were gonna get frisky under the blankets on the bus. And then it comes to the end where he's talking to his grandma, and Lola and Norval are begging his grandma to put her brain back in her body so that they can get it on. And she's just like, okay, only for a few minutes. And they're like, yes, that's enough time, thank you. At least Norval wanted to wait until she was in her body, but unlike Fred, who I don't even know how that worked in season 1, did a threesome with all of the brains, even though they were in a jar. I also would like to know what they were doing under that blanket, but I'm not going to think about it too hard because I might lose my mind. So after she agrees to put Lola's brain back in her body, Norval's looking down and he's like, oh, she's so hot. And Lola's like, oh, am I the hottest? Yeah, you're the hottest, babe. And then he goes, yeah. And she's like, then why are you looking at Brenda's body? And then for the rest of the episode, she's just mad at him because he had no way of knowing that which one was Lola. Like, how would he know? And then another thing I thought was pretty funny was Velma pretending she destroyed the bathroom because her dad was a wanted criminal and he was hiding back there. And they're all trapped on a bus, right? And the bus, there's only one bathroom. So she steps out of the bus bathroom and she's like, nobody go in there. Very terrible things in there. And so everyone's like, because she basically just committed social suicide. I was pretty entertained by that. This reveal at the end is kind of funny though, because imagine you're in the military and you're like the only woman in this military base and they assign you the boring job to spy on the teenagers. So you get a job as a waitress in a diner and you're brain rotting for years because you're not challenging yourself. And then you finally get your first break. You see someone, Velma's mom, investigating Project Scooby, and because it's your job to report these things, you send the photos to a crazy woman, get her kidnapped, and then get involved with the woman who you got kidnapped's husband, have a baby with him. That was just crazy to me. I was just thinking about that when I was sitting here. I was like, wait a second, girl, you got yourself all entangled in your subjects' lives. And then now you have to run away with Scrappy to protect your children because you got emotionally involved. Anyway, I watched this because I was bored and I'd finished all my things for that day. And also because I'm a professional hate watcher, like that's my job. I don't get paid, but that's my job. So, I do not recommend that anyone else watch this though. It's a solid 5 out of 10, maybe even a 4. I have to give it some points because it was entertaining even though most of it was nonsense. See you guys next week. Like and subscribe for more.